Welcome back, everybody. This is going to be our second day in Argoflows implementation, and I'll switch straight away to the screen share. This is exactly where we had left 3 days ago. As you see, last time we were facing an issue, or not exactly an issue, but we noticed that the CI was not green. It was just that it was not doing much, maybe. But ultimately, without any change, it's now we now have a green badge. We also now have a star. So we have our first star. That's cool. Okay, so let's get into some code. I'm again at Argoflows. Don't really have any changes in locally. Let me straight away jump into the where we were. So we could port forward on the service that is exposed by Argo server, and we could also do a version check. If you remember, we would hyphen s is something that I have just added. This which is to silent the extra output that is generated by curl. K is to skip verification of TLS certificate. Hyphen h is to set the header. We are saying here is the authorization header with the value set to the Argo token or the token that we were generating in the secret. Now, I'll take a pause for a second here and tell you or request you that if you have not, if you're unaware how we reached to this point and what exactly we are trying to do here, I would highly, highly recommend you check out the previous video and just take a pause here, go back to the previous one, understand what we are trying to solve and how we reached here, and just come back. But if not, just feel free to stay around. Okay, so let's get into Vim. And we also did agree upon certain structure how we want to proceed by designing our API. And it was the treat on SRC that we will have modules under API, config, error, and any types that we want to expose. Okay, so let me switch over to Chrome again and show you what Argo Workflows API documentation says, or API reference. So we have different APIs. These are the API endpoints. And down here, there is down here it is info service. This is where I would like to actually start. We should be able to get the version of the server, the exact same thing that we were doing in using curl. This so you are doing a request to the version path and getting the version. We should be able to do it using our client. So this is the goal. Let's see how much we can cover in just one video. Let's stop it, exit. But at the same time, if you remember from the last video, we saw that in all the APIs or all the API clients that we see, there was this configuration use. So if you look at info service, down here, you see that they expect configuration to be present for all the API endpoints. So I would start by implementing this configuration first and proceed from there so that we can build on top of it. So okay, I'll keep it onto the right of my screen and switch back to web. Now I did mention it last time as well, but for all the binaries, the entry point will always be main.rs under src. But for all the libraries or crates that are like sort of exposed as dependencies, it's always a lib.rs, which is the type for library. Under library, so in Rust, every file with the extension .rs and every directory uh, is a way of defining modules. So in here we are saying there are going to be 4 modules, but how does lib.rs know, okay, that this is going to be a module? So what we do is in in here we will say there is a mod or there is a module called config, but it will complain that there is there's nothing there. So what we have to do is we have to go inside config and create a file called mod.rs, which will declare it as a module. Let's open this file, and in here we can maybe not do anything, but config is going to be the home for the configuration that we just saw. So I'll copy this strut that I just saw and just paste it in. Now, there are a few things I don't really like about it already, and if I'm going too fast about this, do let me know in the comment if you want me to touch about a certain aspect about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, or if you want me to cover something else in parallel. But I would prefer to move a little faster because we want to publish it right onto crates.io. So to start with, I don't really think I want to use an API key. I also don't want to use basic auth and OAuth. I also don't think an user agent is required. So we are simply going to use a client, and I would prefer to call it bearer token, not bearer access token. Bearer access token is too big of a name. And here we have our first error. The request is not present. So that's why we are getting the error. Request is a crate. Um, it's unable to resolve the name request. So where is the request coming from? If you go to docs.rs or is it docs.rs? I think so. Yeah. So there are different crates that are available. We can search for a particular crate and see what that crate does. So there is request. So request provides a convenient high-level HTTP client. So we need to connect with the Argo server over HTTP, and that's why we need um, request. Now by default, not by default, but the stubs that we generated using Open API generator, they use or they expose an async API. I don't want to get into async just yet. So I would prefer to rather use a blocking API, which is available as a blocking client in here. So the way you create a blocking client is using request, blocking, and client, and then new. So I'll change the code accordingly. I would okay. First, we need to bring in request in scope. So how do we do that? Our code or our Argoflows as of now does not know about request. Um, so how do we add it? So we can do cargo add request, and blocking is actually a feature that you have to opt into. It's not the default. By default, request exposes an async client. So let's use the feature blocking, and now we should be able to compile. So you see the error is gone. Now there is a problem. This client as of now is a async client. What I want to do is rather use a blocking client. So I would import blocking, and I will as create an alias for it, which is request. Why am I doing this like this? Is the reason is a month down the line, if I ever look back, or anyone who looks at our code and sees what if we were to use something like this, anyone who looks at our code needs to go back into where this client is coming from. They need to figure out looking at the use statements, and I don't really like it. I think it's a practice in Rust as well. It's a good practice that you should always have the the crate that you are using or the type is coming from in the path of how you're importing it, or how you're using, importing. So this is how I see it coming. But at the same time, I don't like the huge name. I prefer short names. So this could be just this. Now, where is this Beth? There is a. Uh, no, I could do one more thing. Uh, Let me minimize the sidebar. Keep this on to this and bring in VS Code to be this side. All right. So we have configuration open. We have trimmed this to in this structure. Now there is a default implementation of you which you can have for configuration and this the base path is set to the base path is set to HTTP localhost and whatnot. This is not what we want to do. So we could have an implementation defined for config, which exposes a function called new, which returns self or it returns base path. But I actually like to have this as a constant instead of doing it like this. So let's define a constant here. In Rust, constants are screaming case, so which means it's all uppercase, and also the snake case. So default base path, and you also need to define a type. This is going to be a reference stir or a string slice, which is going to be set to um, which is going to be set to what we just copied. Except that this is going to be at HTTPS. I don't want to host or connect with the server over HTTP because I don't think that is right. So we have declared a static constant. Now what we can do is base path, since it's a string, not a string slice, we will need something like uh, oops, default base path dot to owned. Um, so I did talk about references in the Rust Rs series. References are references are how do we say it? Why is, so references are not owned values. A reference point to something in memory, and what we are at this line saying that we want the ownership of the string that we are pointing to. So give us a owned reference, an owned a copy of from the memory. So this is how it can be done. At the same time, bearer token can be set to none because it's an option. It may not be present there. And client is going to be request dot client dot new. Now this is going to be a blocking client. All right. Let's also add some documentation, maybe. But you know what? I can add the documentation offline. That's totally fine. So the next thing we need is now we are able to construct the config. it should suffice to be able to write our first API. That is info. Let's open the side window under APIs. I want to create. This is again a directory, so we need to tell Rust. Okay, this is going to be a module, so you should add a file called mod.rs. This has been created, and now we need API called info.rs. The mod.rs needs to know that under this directory, there's a different module that exists, which is known as info. And we can just straight away jump to info.rs. By default, everything is private in Rust. So you have to declare pub using the pub keyword. You can declare them public. You want to declare a public function called get version, which is going to have a reference to the config that we have just created. Now, how do we bring it into scope? The way you do it is by using create, and then the creator gives you the to gets you to the root of the library or the crate that you are building. So we are now at Argoflows, and now what we want to do is bring in config. And since it's a local crate, I can use config. Plus, this is config, which is not really a good name, but I don't really have a better idea as of now. All right. So, looking good so far. The get version implementation, let's see what it does. Info service, which is fine. Get version is going to make a call. But interesting thing is that it returns a lot of things, which is result of models, and there is also an error. Okay. The name of the model is iu.project period. The way I imagined it to be is a result of type version. Okay. And it should be the error type could be error of get version error. Now, of course, we do not have those types defined, but we will do that in just a bit. So this is the structure that we have as of now. Now we need to define these types. So I'll move the Chrome or the code window to the right so that I can type and you can also see a better picture. Yes. So we wanted to keep all our types defined under the types directory or the types module. So this is going to have again a mod.rs, And at the same time, this is also going to need one more, which is going to be info.rs. Let's go to info.rs and define a public struct, which is going to be version. Now, there are a lot of fields that need to be present here. The version struct in here looks like this. So maybe we can just use this. Okay. Oops. Build date compiler. Okay, we can just reuse this. The only thing is that it's complaining about probably is that we do not have serialize or deserialize in scope. Plus the file is not included in the crate. Why is that? Oh, sorry. Think that should do. And we can exit this. Let's reopen. And what else is the issue? Why is it still complaining about right all weird? Interesting. It's not complaining about serialized or deserialized, rather it's complaining about files not being excluded included. Interesting. I thought at this point it would have been complaining about serialize and deserialize. Oh, okay, my bad. So we have not declared types to be a module. Now we should have the right error. This is. Oh, we were under types info. Yep. Now we're getting the right error, which is that Rust is not included in crates. So file is not included in crate. Okay, we can revisit that. The main error is cannot find derive macros, serialize and deserialize. This is because we do not have the SERDI crate in our scope, and I will borrow this exactly from the cargo of under cargo. So we added request, we use cargo add, and the same way we can also do something like this, where you straight away just copy paste or add the at the crate or dependency you want to pull in, and any details that you need from that. So if we save this, cargo should be able to pull those dependencies, and should be good to go. Not yet. Let's do cargo build, and it's pulling in everything that it needs to compile. Cool. Um, okay, we now need to bring in scope, not cargo. use Surdy straight away, I think. Yeah, use Surdy, serialize Surdy, and again going alphabetical order. Deserialize and serialize. Okay, it's file is running. I don't know what's going on. So this is cool. Uh, we have this exported. We actually want these. Okay, I'll come back to this once we run into an issue. I see an issue here, but let's not talk about it just yet. So in our info service, we should now be able to do something like use create types info, and we should be able to do version. Does not really complain. The file is not included in the ID. Something is not going right today. So we have defined the version, and now we want to define the error. What is the type, the error they are defining? Okay, things just got a bit complicated. uh, so if you remember um, in here in the info service, this there is this error. If I go to definition, which can I go to definition? I can't go to definition. Wow. So under models, I'll need to search where this error is coming from. This is coming from super and error. Where is this? It's using super. Yes, sorry, my bad. Since it was super, it should have been present in the same mod, no, in the same module under APIs. So here is the error, which is something that we need to use as well because it's a custom type of error. So okay, let me try and explain what's happening here. If I like, I'm not fully acquainted with Rust yet, so but still, I'll try. So what we are saying is, even if we forget T for once, we are defining error as an enum type, and this error could be of four types. They are like we did in like there are four possibilities of that the error could be of. It could be a request error, it could be a SERDI error, it could be an IO error, and it could also be a response error. And what this response error is, it's again a custom type, which must be defined somewhere around here only. No? Oh, sorry, it's an enum. So yeah. response error, which is of the type response content, which is here. This is what's happening. And why do we need these four types? Because it makes sense, right? So every part of your code could return different kind of errors, and those can be categorized into these enum types. I think that's a great way of doing this. So this is generic on T, and because we will have custom definitions of each of different errors, those can be passed in here, and accordingly, one part of the code could say, this is an error, this is a SERDI error, this is a request error, and so on and so forth. And what's happening here is we are implementing the display trait for the error type. And based on the type of the error, which is coming from this enum, essentially what we are doing is we are returning a string representation of or format result for that. So every error will say result request kind of. So when you, okay, a lot of words. So when you print an error, if it's a request type, the string will start somewhere as quote unquote request, and then the message of the string, which means that we are passing on the information about using request, SERDI, IO, and response. We are passing on the information to the user that what happened really, where the error is coming from. We also have a debug implementation, which is simply the dumping, which simply dumps the error as it is. All right, so we're going to need a lot of things from here. Okay, a lot of typing. So let's get to it. I'll again pull this onto, we can actually copy paste, but it should be fine since we have talked about this. Yeah, it should be fine. I'll move it to the, oops, I prefer to move the workspace. So we did define a module called error. First of all, let's go to lib.rs and declare it. There is a module called error. And now we can go to error directory and add a file called mod.rs. And this mod.rs will actually hold everything that we have specific to errors. So let me start pulling in that everything that we need. Okay. Where is this response content coming from? This is actually be okay. This should not be response content. Working in two types of code editors sometimes can be confusing. I keep on using a Vim shortcuts into VS Code and vice versa. Okay, well, let's start typing. So what we want to do is define an enum, which is going to be our error type. It needs to be generic on T because, okay, let's not define it generic yet, and you will see why we need it to be generic. Now the error could be of different types. It could be mon, it could be a request error. This is really frustrating right now. It could be a request error, so we need to bring in scope request. So use request and error. The next possibility could be surdy, which is obvious. So we'll bring in surdy JSON and error. Also, since we're using the name of the crate, we don't need to provide the type as well. We can simply say use request, and likewise we can just say request use surdy JSON. And the other option is IO, which is coming from the standard library. Uh, standard IO error. And the next one we have is a response error. So I don't response. Since error is the type of the enum, I would just prefer to use it response. And this is response content, which is of type T. What is response content? It is generic on T. T is an entity. How is it used? Okay, so when we do a request call or request or send a request to HTTP over HTTP, we get a response and we have different fields. It can have a status code, it will have content, and it might have something else. So as of now, as I see in the code base, that they are using status, uh, content, and entity, which is the entity which is coming from, or the type you want to return from the or the exact error that you want to return from them, which means let me bring it in. So this is the code I was looking at. So what they're doing is, if there is an error, they're returning a response error with local var error. So let's go with the flow. What is local var error? This is actually a response content. So what the response content has, it has got a status. The status is it is set from the status field of the response that we got from request. And then there is content, which we got as response. And then we also have entity. So what this entity is, this is actually an option of info service get version error. So the API endpoint is get version. It is under info service, and we are returning an error that is very specific to that API endpoint. And I love it already, because you know at different endpoints, if we have multiple APIs, which we do in this case, and we have multiple endpoints exposed over each API, it becomes very important that our client gets to know which endpoint and failed, and there should the error should be defined specific to the endpoint, so that each error could have different set of feeds, different set of information. And this is absolutely a great thought process. So yes, we should definitely be using it. So I'll move it back here, and let's create a response content of type T, which is actually let's define response content. In fact, since we're doing this, this should not be here. This should not be here. Rather, we should be using create. Since it's a type in our whole system, it should be like use create types, and then we should have It's how it should be, I think. So, where is this T coming from? T needs to be declared that this type is generic, or this enum is generic on type T. Now it complains about that types does not have anything as response content. So let's go to types mod.rs, and maybe we should just define under mod info. We should be able to define the response content. Yes. Pub struct as its response content, which is generic on T. It has three fields: pub status, which is request status code. This is usually the status code that you receive in your response. Content is going to be a string, which is the response body, as far as I understand from the code we that looked together. And entity is going to be an option of a specific error type that you want to return. Okay, this has derived from debug so that we can debug it wherever we like. And we also need to bring in scope quest. No, use quest. Okay, let's jump back to errors. Okay, so this is looking better now. No errors or compilation issues. If if this felt a lot confusing, do let me know, and I'll be happy to go through each line again, and we can talk about it once more. For now, I'll just continue and also check on. Well, the video is already 43 minutes long, but I'd at least prefer to have errors defined. So let's continue. Now, I don't see a value in typing out the exact implementations. So I'll just simply bring in this code. What's happening here is there is a crate in the standard library called FMT display, and this you implementing the display trait, you can actually define when you print something in the println macro how your data is represented. So this is exactly what's happening here. So let me bring in standard in scope. Use standard FMT. And yep. So what we're saying is when we get for each type of enum, we are defining implementing the display trait for for error type. Since it's generic, it needs to define the T or declare T and then use it in the error type. We have not at all talked about generics in Rust as of today, as of the time of recording this video. But I do have some experience with generics being used in. I've used them in C sharp. I've used them in Rust a little bit. And then this is a static syntax for the for function signature for the fmt function. And then what we're doing is let module be an e be a match on self. What is self? This is implemented on error t. So self is this. For each uh, for each type, we declare a match. So yep. Okay. Let's continue. There is also a debug trait or debug representation of the error. So for us to be able to use debug, we have to do it by implementing the crate for standard error. So let's bring in scope. Oops. Um, Trying to stay as alphabetical sorted as much as I can. Um, does it? So we are getting an error, and it says that error does not implement debug trait. Debug trait is the debug trait is not implemented for error of t. Manually implement debug for t. Did we not just do that? Oh, okay. All we need to do is derive debug. Now we have a debug, the default implementation for error type of debug trait. That should solve the issue. Yep. Next thing we need is I would actually like this. There are two more implementations that we have from which are more or less like type conversions. So let's bring them in as well. What's happening here is there's what we are doing here is that we are building or returning error that we have just defined above from a SERD error. So we are um, taking the SERD error if we get one, and then uh, uh, creating error, the enum that we have defined based on that error. So this is just a fairly simple thing that we're doing here. It may look a little daunting and confusing because of the syntax, but other than that is fairly simple. So it's I was thinking of an example that I could share, but it will require me to do a lot of typing. So imagine this to be of the sorts. If you have an enum foo, which has a variant bar and which takes in a string, and you can implement from I think from stir. Is it Oh, no, 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 no. This needs to be generic. Yeah, again, it will ultimately become the same thing. So it's like who bar takes in bar could be anything. Then we have to declare T and say we want to be able to convert from stir, or it could be like this as well to avoid any further confusion. Repeat this as well. And from say S or X of type string, we can return. Sorry, this needs to be a concrete type. And we can simply return foo bar of X. So it doesn't make sense that you're trying to return. What this allows you to do, where is it complaining? Type annotations unit must be declared on enum foo. Oh, what did I do wrong? Empty. Um, Interesting. What did I mess up? Oh, I didn't save the file. Public info. Is it? What's wrong here? I'm declaring foo, which is generic on T, but T is not. T is not being used anywhere. So it could be some, and then it could be of type. What am I doing wrong? Okay. Variant in this that code. Okay. That code is fine by me. So maybe this is not a good example. We should be doing it like say I32. I32. And this will now fail because you cannot just straight away convert integers to a string, because what you will probably need to do is you'll need to parse it something like that. Y be of type I32, and will be, I think, X dot parse, and then ultimately you should be able to do Y. Parse returns some, I think, result or option. I think result. We can call unwrap on it. Nope, something else is wrong. No method called parse on I32. Okay, but at least you got the idea. That I'm fine. So you can convert from certain types to certain other types using the from syntax. I hope you get the idea. So this is what's happening here. Just delete this. And now we at least have our error type. The next part is we look at this info service is that, so we have in the version we have configuration info service. We have declared error. We also have declared the version type. And now what we need is to define another type, get version service error. So I'll stop here, and we'll resume in the next video. I'll see if it compiles. I'll probably push it. Just the maybe. So in the last video, we also talked about having incremental commits. So I'll probably create a branch, info service, and this should uh, maybe um, it's called, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. And then wait. So I'll add everything, or rather, what are the things that we have defined? I'd kind of, I'll hold here. We have defined a few things, but I'd want to add comments to them, and then maybe we should commit. I'll do adding the comments offline, which should be fine because that's still okay. Not adding code really. So let's stop here. We will resume on to our service in info service and take it from there. It's fun, and it's going to be challenging at the same time, I feel. Let's see how it goes. I hope to be able to publish uh, onto crates.io in the next video, hopefully. Okay, thank you for watching. Bye bye.